While there is no universally agreed upon system of typeface classification, these terms are widely used. And beginning chronologically, in the mid-15th century, we have the Venetian old styles. These are also referred to as being humanist old styles. If we just zoom in on an example, what these have in common is a diagonal stress. If we were to draw a line from the thin part of the letter through to the thin part of the letter down here, we would have a diagonal. What makes them humanistic is that they replicate the angle of a calligraphic pen. What distinguishes the Venetian old styles from the Gerolde old styles, which we'll be looking at next, is that the horizontal crossbar on the E is also diagonal. So moving now to the next category, very similar, although there is in this category more contrast between the thick and the thin parts of the letters, and these have the horizontal crossbars on the E. Breaking out of the chronology here, we have the script category, and obviously these typefaces are supposed to replicate the human hand, and when using these we want to make sure that the different strokes of the letters actually join up the way they would if they had been drawn by the human hand. Back now chronologically, we have the transitional category, and as their name implies, they are transitional between the old styles which came before them and the modern category which comes after them. And these are distinguished by a more vertical stress on the letters rather than a diagonal stress, and as such they are more characteristic of the machine age, and indeed they correspond in time with the Industrial Revolution. The chief exemplar of this category is Baskerville, designed by John Baskerville in the mid-18th century. Moving to the next category, the modern or Didone category, modern here being a relative term. These came into usage in the late 18th century, and perhaps the best known example of this category is Bodoni. And these take the contrast of the letters, the difference between thick and thin parts of the letters, further than the transitional category did, so that there is a great deal of difference between thick and thin. Continuing with our chronology, we have the slab serifs, which became popular at the beginning of the 19th century, coinciding with the birth of advertising. And what distinguishes these is the shape of the serifs. They are just wedges at the bottom of the letters rather than being bracketed in the case of the old style. And there is much less distinction between thin and thick parts of the letters. Getting closer to the present day, we have the sans serifs, which first became used in the early 19th century but did not become popular until the early 20th century, with art movements like Bauhaus, Constructivism, and De Stijl. Sans serifs can be broken down into distinct categories, but here I'm taking them all as one, and we have things like Futura, Gill Sans, and the contemporary Myriad Pro. Futura distinct from Gill Sans in that it is considered to be a geometric sans serif, whereas Gill Sans maintains the proportions of the old style fonts that we saw earlier and is thus considered to be a humanistic sans serif. Then we have a few more classifications, decorative and display. Their name is pretty self-explanatory, and these would be used for display and headline type. Then we have the black letter or fraktur category, which we see used on newspaper mastheads. Monospace fonts, a relic of the typewriter age where each letter occupies the same horizontal width. So if you want a typeface in some way to evoke type created on a typewriter, this would be a good choice. Then we have ornaments, and we also have picture fonts or dingback fonts that we can use for very specific purposes like maps or other symbols. So that's a quick breakdown of the different classes of type.